Every man has heard phrases from women that sound simple, harmless, even polite, but carry a meaning that is completely different from the words spoken. These aren't manipulations, they're coded emotional messages that most men never learn to decode. And the more you misunderstand them, the more she pulls away. So today we're breaking down the most common lies women tell men, not to expose them, but to show you what she actually means, what she's trying to communicate, and how you can respond like a man who truly understands female psychology. When a woman says, "I'm fine," she is rarely communicating that everything is actually okay. This phrase usually appears when she has reached an emotional threshold where she no longer feels understood, acknowledged, or safe enough to express her real feelings. It is not a lie in the malicious sense, it is a protective mechanism. Women often use this phrase when they feel the conversation will lead to conflict, dismissal, or minimization of what they're experiencing. Instead of opening up and risking emotional exposure, they choose a short, neutral sentence to protect themselves from further disappointment. You have to understand that women communicate differently because their emotional wiring is different. For her, the relationship is a space where she expects emotional sensitivity, intuition, and connection. When she says, "I'm fine," what she might actually mean is, "I'm hurt and I don't feel like you'll understand," or "I tried to express myself before and it didn't go well," or "I don't want to fight, but I am not okay." This is where most men make the mistake of taking her words literally, believing the issue is resolved and moving on. But for her, silence is not resolution. Silence is self-protection. Women shut down emotionally when they feel like speaking up won't make a difference. Maybe she has already communicated her needs and feels like you ignored them. Maybe the situation is emotionally loaded and she is afraid that expressing the truth will escalate the problem. Or maybe she worries that if she speaks honestly, you will see her as overly sensitive, dramatic, or difficult. Instead of risking those labels, she retreats behind "I'm fine" because it feels safer than vulnerability. In that moment, she is testing something, but not in the manipulative way men often assume. She is assessing whether you can read emotional cues, whether you will make the effort to understand what she isn't saying directly, and whether you care enough to ask again. She doesn't want you to interrogate her or demand explanations. She wants reassurance. She wants patience. She wants emotional presence. The real test is whether you stay connected or disconnect the moment communication becomes subtle. A big mistake men make is responding with frustration. They say things like, "You're clearly not fine," or "Just tell me what's wrong," or "Why can't you just say it directly?" This makes her close off even further. A woman's emotional world isn't linear. She doesn't organize feelings through logic first. She processes them through experience and connection. When you push her to speak before she feels emotionally safe, she interprets it as invalidation. She hears impatience, not concern. The right response is grounded, calm, and attentive. Instead of reacting, you hold space. You say something like, "I can see something's bothering you. I'm here when you're ready," or "You don't have to explain it right now, but I care about how you feel." These small, steady sentences communicate emotional security. They tell her she doesn't need to hide her feelings to keep the peace. Emotional safety is the foundation of feminine expression, and when she feels it, she naturally opens up. Another layer behind "I'm fine" is that she might be overwhelmed with emotions she hasn't fully understood herself yet. Women sometimes need time to organize their feelings before they can express them clearly. When she says "I'm fine," she might be buying time to process what's going on inside. When you give her that space without distancing yourself, she sees you as emotionally mature and capable of supporting her. The phrase "I'm fine" becomes a turning point in relationships. It reveals whether a man responds with ego or with understanding. It shows whether he prioritizes being right or being emotionally present. And it signals whether he sees communication as a task to complete or a connection to maintain. When a woman says, "I don't need anything," she is rarely communicating a literal truth. This phrase usually emerges from a deeper emotional pattern rooted in how women evaluate effort, intention, and the security a man provides. Women often say this when they want something but don't want to feel like they are begging for it. The feminine instinct looks for voluntary action, not forced obligation. She wants to see if you offer, if you care, and if your effort comes from your own awareness rather than her instructions. Many men misunderstand this dynamic. They hear the words, assume she genuinely wants nothing, and move on. But women don't measure love through the absence of problems. They measure it through the presence of effort. I don't need anything is often an emotional checkpoint. She wants to see if you notice her discomfort, her tiredness, her disappointment, or her silence. She wants to see if you pick up on the emotional atmosphere without her spelling it out. This is not manipulation. It is how the feminine gauges emotional intelligence and attentiveness. Women naturally desire a man who takes initiative because it signals strength, reliability, and emotional awareness. When she says she doesn't need anything, she is often hoping you will still offer something small that shows you care. Your presence, your support, your reassurance, or even a simple gesture that says you are tuned in. To her, initiative proves intention, effort proves commitment, thoughtfulness proves emotional maturity. It's also important to understand that women carry emotional burdens quietly. They often minimize their needs because society has conditioned them to avoid appearing needy or demanding. So when she says, I don't need anything, sometimes it's because she genuinely feels guilty for asking. She doesn't want to impose. She doesn't want to feel like a burden. She wants to be valued without having to constantly request attention or support. A man who understands this will never take her minimalism at face value. Men often make the mistake of assuming independence means she wants to handle everything on her own. Yes, women are capable and strong, but emotional independence doesn't eliminate emotional desire. A woman doesn't want a man to fix everything. She wants him to show he notices. When she says she doesn't need anything, she may actually want a conversation, reassurance, affection, or simply your presence next to her. She doesn't need you to solve her life. She needs to feel like she matters to you. The phrase also becomes a test of consistency. Women don't want gestures that only appear during arguments or on special occasions. They look for men who show consistent effort, men who don't wait for a crisis to step up. I don't need anything is often an emotional doorway. If you walk through it, she feels chosen. If you ignore it, she feels invisible. And women withdraw emotionally long before they walk away physically. The smartest way to handle this phrase is with calm initiative. Don't overwhelm her with questions and don't pressure her into explaining. Instead, offer something genuine and grounded. It can be as simple as, I'm here if you need me, or let me help you with this, or I noticed you're a little quiet. Let's talk later when you feel ready. These responses show presence, not control. They show attentiveness, not interrogation. Women open up to men who make them feel safe and valued, not men who wait for explicit instructions. The feminine doesn't communicate through direct demands, it communicates through subtle cues. When she says she doesn't need anything, what she truly wants is to feel prioritized without asking, understood without explaining, and cared for without conditions. When a woman says it's not a big deal, she is often doing the exact opposite of minimizing. She is swallowing hurt, suppressing tension, and protecting the relationship from a potential conflict she doesn't feel prepared to navigate. Women use this phrase when they don't want their emotional experience to be dismissed or ridiculed, so they choose the safer route, downplaying it. It's not that the issue doesn't matter, it's that she doesn't feel confident the moment is safe enough to express how much it actually does. Women have been conditioned for a long time to appear easygoing, not dramatic or not emotional, especially around men. Society punishes them for sensitivity, yet expects them to be nurturing. This contradiction creates a pressure where expressing genuine hurt feels risky, so instead she minimizes it. That's why it's not a big deal is less about the situation itself and more about her fear of the emotional consequences of telling the truth. She worries that you will accuse her of overreacting, call her too sensitive, or treat her feelings like they're insignificant. The emotional reality is that women often speak in layers. Their words convey surface information, but their tone, body language, and timing reveal what's underneath. When she says it's not a big deal, she is trying to maintain peace, not inner peace, but relational peace. She wants to avoid escalating tension, especially if past conversations have made her feel unheard or invalidated. In her mind, suppressing her feelings might feel safer than risking another conflict where her emotions are minimized. Many men mistake this phrase as permission to move on quickly. They assume the issue is closed, the tension is gone, and the relationship is stable again. But what's happening internally for her is very different. Every time she suppresses hurt, a layer of emotional distance forms. She may stay quiet in the moment, but the resentment grows underneath. Not because she wants to hold a grudge, but because she never had a safe space to release it. When a woman says something isn't a big deal, she is also revealing how she sees your emotional leadership. If she feels she can express small hurts without backlash, she won't suppress them. But if she feels she has to protect your ego, manage your reactions, or choose between honesty and harmony, she will hide her feelings to keep the relationship steady. Emotional safety determines whether she speaks openly or shuts down. This phrase also reflects another feminine pattern, prioritizing the relationship over her own discomfort. A woman would rather absorb emotional pain than create instability. She cares about connection so deeply that she tries to protect it by sacrificing her own voice. But over time, these sacrifices accumulate. Eventually, the smallest issue can trigger a larger reaction because her emotional storage is full. That's why men often get confused when suddenly she opens up about things from months ago. It wasn't sudden, it was suppressed. The key here is understanding that her words are not the whole story. Women reveal feelings through subtle behaviors, tone shifts, quietness, withdrawal, or hesitation. If you pay attention to her emotional signals, you'll see the truth behind the phrase. She doesn't need you to interrogate her or force her to explain. She needs reassurance that her emotions matter, even when she labels them as small. A powerful way to respond is to gently signal that her feelings are safe with you. Instead of accepting the phrase literally, you might say, "It may not be a big deal to you, but if something bothered you, I want to understand. This isn't pressure, it's presence. It shows you care enough to look beyond the surface." It reminds her she doesn't have to minimize who she is to keep the peace. When a woman says, "Do whatever you want," she is rarely giving you actual permission. This phrase is almost never about freedom. It's about frustration, disappointment, or unmet expectations. Women typically use this line when they feel their boundaries, preferences, or emotional needs are being ignored. It is a sign that she has already communicated, directly or indirectly, what she hoped you would understand, and now she's withdrawing because she feels like you're either not listening or not taking her feelings seriously. Women do not like repeating themselves, especially when it comes to emotional needs, not because they are stubborn, but because repeating their desires over and over makes them feel unvalued. If she already expressed her discomfort, concerns, or wishes, and you still proceed in the direction she warned you about, "Do whatever you want" becomes her last line of defense. It is her way of saying she no longer feels respected or emotionally considered in that moment. She is stepping back, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much to keep pushing. This phrase comes from a deeper emotional place. Women want a man who shows understanding without needing constant instruction. They want alignment, not rebellion. They want cooperation, not confrontation. When she says, "Do whatever you want," it's often because she senses resistance from you, and instead of escalating into an argument, she shuts down emotionally. It is a form of self-protection. She is trying to avoid a fight, avoid feeling rejected again, or avoid looking like she is controlling. So she retreats behind that line to keep the peace, even though internally she is anything but peaceful. For men, the dangerous part is misinterpreting this as approval. Many men hear this phrase and assume the conflict is over, the issue is settled, and they're free to proceed. But to her, it signals the opposite. The moment you take her words literally is the moment she feels emotionally abandoned. She wants you to sense that something is off, that she is hurt, that she needs reassurance, not a green light to continue ignoring her concern. Women communicate with emotional nuance, and when those nuances are missed repeatedly, they stop offering them altogether. Another layer behind this phrase is fatigue. She may feel exhausted from trying to communicate respectfully. Maybe she tried to express her feelings and you shut her down. Maybe she voiced discomfort and you dismissed it. Maybe she simply feels unheard. When a woman reaches emotional exhaustion, she stops explaining and starts detaching. "Do whatever you want" is a sign she is retreating into emotional distance because she no longer has the energy to fight for understanding. The emotional meaning is simple. She wants to see whether you will choose consideration over convenience. She wants to see if you will think about how your actions affect her, not because she forced you to, but because you value her feelings. Women don't desire control, they desire connection. They don't want to police your decisions, they want to feel included in them. When she says this phrase, she is not testing your obedience, she is evaluating your emotional maturity. The right way to respond is not defensiveness or taking her words literally. The right response is calm awareness. Something like, "I feel something's bothering you, let's talk," or "I don't want to do something that makes you uncomfortable. Tell me what's hurting you," shows emotional leadership. It shows that her feelings matter enough for you to pause, reflect, and reconnect. What she truly wants in those moments is reassurance that her emotions are not invisible. She wants to feel like her concerns don't need to be screamed to be taken seriously. She wants to know that her emotional boundaries are noticed and respected without her having to beg for it. When you understand the deeper meaning behind this phrase, you'll see that she isn't pushing you away. She's quietly asking you to step closer. When a woman says, "I'm not mad," it is almost always the opposite of the truth. This phrase is her emotional shield, a way to protect herself from feeling exposed, misunderstood, or judged. Women often use this line when they are upset, but don't feel safe enough to express the intensity of what they're feeling. It is not dishonesty rooted in manipulation. It is a defensive reflex designed to create emotional distance until she is sure the space is safe for vulnerability. Women say, "I'm not mad," for many different reasons. Sometimes she is overwhelmed and doesn't have the emotional clarity to talk yet. Other times she fears the conversation will end in conflict, especially if previous attempts to express her emotions were dismissed or minimized by partners in the past. This phrase becomes a barrier she uses to avoid escalating tension or appearing too emotional. It's her attempt to manage the situation, not because she doesn't trust you, but because she doesn't trust the moment. When she says she's not mad, what she is actually protecting is her dignity. She doesn't want to break down, cry, or reveal frustration before she feels grounded. Women often feel vulnerable admitting anger because anger exposes investment. She worries that if she admits she's upset, she will be blamed for overreacting or criticized for being sensitive. So instead, she hides the anger until she feels emotionally steady enough to explain it. This is why she may seem calm externally but distant, quieter than usual, or withdrawn. A common mistake men make is taking the phrase literally and assuming the issue has disappeared. But emotional suppression doesn't equate to emotional resolution. She is not fine, she is holding herself together. If you ignore the emotional shift and proceed normally, she interprets it as emotional neglect. Women need emotional acknowledgement, not silence. When her emotions go unnoticed or unaddressed, she doesn't feel understood. She feels invisible. Another layer behind "I'm not mad" is emotional testing, but not in a malicious way. She wants to see whether you can notice her emotional cues without her needing to spell them out. She wants to see if you can read energy, tone, and behavior. Women value emotional intelligence because it signals that the man is present, attentive, and capable of handling emotional nuance. When she says she isn't mad, she is often hoping you'll say something like, "I can sense something is bothering you. It's okay, I'm here whenever you're ready." This approach doesn't pressure her, it reassures her. Women don't want to be interrogated when they're upset. They don't respond well to lines like, "Just tell me what's wrong," or "Why are you acting like this?" These phrases make her shut down more deeply because they imply that her emotions are inconvenient. When she hears impatience instead of concern, she withdraws to avoid feeling foolish for feeling hurt. On the other hand, emotional patience from a man makes her soften. When you acknowledge her shifts gently, she feels safe, respected, and valued. She doesn't want you to drag the truth out of her. She wants you to create an environment where she can offer it willingly. Emotional safety isn't built by demanding explanations. It's built by showing her that her feelings won't be used against her. Women also say, "I'm not mad," when they're trying to maintain harmony. She doesn't want the moment to escalate, especially if she senses tension in your tone or defensiveness in your reactions. She knows that revealing her true feelings might ignite a bigger conversation, and she may not have the emotional energy for that right now, so she chooses the fastest route to peace, even if it costs her emotional fullness in the moment. Ultimately, this phrase is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of an emotional doorway she hopes you'll step through gently. When a woman says she isn't mad, she is telling you she needs reassurance, patience, and presence more than anything else. When a woman says, "I'm just busy," the surface meaning seems simple. She has a lot going on. And sometimes that's true. But in relationships, this phrase often carries emotional signals that many men fail to recognize. Women don't usually withdraw emotionally without reason. If she begins using this line more frequently, more abruptly, or more vaguely, it often reflects not her schedule, but her emotional state. Women use busy as a buffer, either to create space, avoid conflict, or gently detach without confrontation. At times, I'm just busy is her way of creating distance because she feels overwhelmed, unappreciated, or misunderstood. Women emotionally retreat when they don't feel safe or valued. Instead of expressing disappointment directly because she fears it may lead to argument, tension, or emotional vulnerability, she chooses a socially acceptable excuse that doesn't invite deeper questions. The word busy protects her from exposing the real reason behind her withdrawal. It's not that she doesn't care, it's that she doesn't feel emotionally stable enough to open up. This phrase often appears after repeated emotional letdowns. Maybe she felt unheard the last time she tried to express herself. Maybe she felt a disconnect in the relationship that she hasn't addressed yet. Maybe she's been carrying emotional load silently and now feels fatigued. Instead of explaining every internal shift, she pulls away subtly. Busy becomes her shield, not her schedule. It's her way of creating emotional breathing space without risking judgment or conflict. For women, emotional closeness is tied to psychological safety. When she feels safe, she leans in. When she feels unsafe, she pulls back. This withdrawal might not be intentional, it might be reflexive. If she senses emotional instability in the relationship, your tone, your reactions, your lack of presence, or your inconsistency, she steps back to protect herself. Women don't detach suddenly, they detach slowly through patterns of micro-distance that men often overlook. And "I'm just busy" is one of the earliest signs. However, it's important to understand that not all distance is rejection. Sometimes a woman genuinely needs space to process her emotions, organize her thoughts, or restore her energy. Women carry relational weight deeply. If something hurts them emotionally, they need time to process before they can talk about it calmly. Busy becomes a placeholder that buys her time. She might not know how to articulate what she feels yet, so she uses the phrase to delay the emotional conversation until she's ready. Men make a common mistake by reacting in one of two extreme ways. Either they become needy and demand answers, or they become distant themselves. Both reactions push her further away. If you pressure her, "Why are you avoiding me? Are you upset? Are you losing interest?" She shuts down even more because now your insecurity has added emotional weight she's not ready to carry. If you mirror her distance and stop reaching out, she interprets it as abandonment or emotional immaturity. Women look for stability during their emotional withdrawal, not panic or coldness. The right approach is calm, masculine steadiness. You don't chase and you don't withdraw. You simply remain anchored. A simple message like, "I hope everything's okay. I'm here whenever you want to talk," communicates emotional safety without pressure. It lets her know you're not threatened by her distance and you're not making assumptions. This steadiness reassures her that she can return without judgment or emotional intensity waiting for her. The deeper meaning behind "I'm just busy" is that she's trying to manage both her emotions and the relationship without causing disruption. She may be protecting herself, or she may be protecting the relationship from a conversation she isn't ready for. Women do not pull away without emotional reason. The phrase is not about time, it's about space. It signals that she is recalibrating, processing, or healing internally, hoping you will understand the quiet message she isn't ready to say out loud.